Hey, True Believers. Chris Matt coming at you with Excalibur #1. Now, before we jump into this was a really great book. I do want to take a moment to say if you guys have Amazon Prime, go watch a documentary. It's called Chris Claremont's X-Men. And that documentary goes over how Len Wein was initially commissioned to start a new X-Men team after, the sales were plummeting under after Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, and just kind of the X-Men book just kept floundering and was almost canceled. But, Len Wein and Dave Cockrum, I believe it was, revitalized the team with Giant Size X-Men #1, and how Len Wein kind of struggled back and forth on if he wanted to continue with the X-Men, and he handed it off to Chris Claremont. And then we follow him and Nisanti and Louise Simonson as they talk about all the years that, Claremont was on the book, and how him, Simonson, and Nisanti kind of kept these characters close to the chest, because these were characters that they loved, and how they always talked about each book that they made, or each story was never about the action, yada yada yada. It was always about a character-driven drama, and that's why these older X-Men books are so good, because the action is just like the cherry on top, because this is layered with emotion, and that's why you cared about the teams. And then they kind of go over Jim Shooter and how he kind of started to push that he wanted, because the X-Men book was selling like hotcakes back in the day, and how Shooter kind of had to push to get another team book, which is how we got New Mutants, and how Claremont reluctantly did it. But he said if anybody was going to do it, he did it, and that's how we got the New Mutants with him and Bob McLeod at first, and then after that was Bill Sienkiewicz. And then initially down the road, we got Excalibur, and how we got Wolverine, and how all of them at that time were written by Chris Claremont, because he wanted to write these stories because these were his characters in his mind. And how he started to stretch himself thin and eventually had to kind of relinquish control. That's why these early ones, again, was Chris Claremont. And then eventually, he got, blindsided with X Factor and how they were going to return Jean Grey. He was not a happy camper. So check out that documentary, because it really goes over a lot of that history, and it's absolutely excellent. Now, with all that preamble out of the way, this was one of the side books, Excalibur. And I love this cover. Absolutely amazing. I love the way how Rachel Gray stands there at the forefront, and she has her Hound uniform, but she also has the Phoenix powers. It's just absolutely beautiful. The print date on this was October 1988. And this makes me feel old, because you see the old Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles commercial there. It's kind of like, yeah, I still have not beaten that game to this day. So this is called Warwolves of London. This was, again, Chris Claremont writing, Alan Davis penciler, which is like, yes, and Paul Neary doing the inks, Tom Orzechowski doing the lettering, Glynis Oliver colorist, and Nisanti and Terry McGavis editors, Tom DeFalco editor-in-chief, and then created by Chris Claremont and Alan Davis. Logo designed by Ken Lopez. So again, you can kind of see how, as each team book had to kind of happen, Claremont kind of brought his team into it. So, him and Ann Nisanti were kind of working on this. And on top of that, we get an all-star cast. I never knew that Alan Davis did the penciling for Excalibur. If that was the case, I would have gotten into this a long time ago. Now, again, one thing with the kind of the Claremont-esque style is I like how we start out in this warehouse and we see this ugly dude from this team called the Crazy Gang, I suppose. And you feel like it has nothing to do with the story. But Claremont always had a masterful way of kind of having these interludes that would build up stories along the way. So this is issue 1, and we do have a story that makes sense. But I like that this kind of builds up for future stories. And it always kind of leaves you with this, see how the dude here is kind of eating out of this head. And it seems dormant, but all of a sudden the eyes pop open and ping! So you just kind of go, well, what's going to go on with that? We will eventually find out. And then we get into the meat and potatoes of our story. So there's a hostage situation going on, and this is where the police kind of ask Excalibur to step in. the chief of police, the constable, is sort of reluctant because he's like, we don't want to bring in costume vigilantes because I've trained police officers at Ham, meaning he's personally done it. But nonetheless, Captain Britain's able to kind of coerce him into letting Excalibur step in. Now, Captain Britain, if you guys don't know a whole lot about him, yeah, he mostly works out of the UK. I think it's the right way. If I'm wrong, feel free to make fun of me down in the comments. But he is the brother of Psylocke Betsy Braddock. So kind of like how they have that connection there. Now on the roof, we see Rachel and Kitty. And this guy's like, a lass your age should be home in bed, not gallivanting about on rooftops at 3 in the morning. And he tries to touch her, phases through her, and she's like, see, Sarge, no need to worry. In our way, we're as professional as you guys, and in our time, my partner and I here have saved the world at least twice. So a gang of street thugs is really no big deal. So boom, look at that. We've had, maybe 3 or 4 pages in, and we kind of get an idea of each character's personality, and then those that have followed Uncanny X-Men for years, we know who Kitty and Phoenix are, or at least this incarnation of Phoenix, because this is Jean Grey's daughter, Rachel, from the Days of Future Past. That's a mouthful. But yeah, you get an idea of who the characters are. Not a whole lot of talking and sitting. This is just, again, just the setup. Because then we start to see who these Warwolves are and what they're capable of. Now, I'm going to ask you, the audience, here a question when we get towards the end, because apparently these characters have been seen before, but I don't know what book it was. So when we get to it, I will pose the question. I just want to have that in your craw for the moment. And again, we start getting stakes because Rachel starts getting this psychic backlash, and she doesn't know where it's coming from. So it kind of puts, a kink in the plans. Kitty's like, what's going on? And it's like, now I'm down to just me, which kind of, with Rachel screaming, interrupts the thugs, so they come looking. So Kitty's like, I got to find a way to make a distraction and spook these guys. And so with her phasing powers, she comes out into the crowd like a ghost. And she's like, who disturbs my rest? And this kind of reminds me, if you guys have read, not the original Ultimate X-Men, but after Ultimatum, we don't want to talk about Ultimatum. But anyway, when they did the, Ultimate Comics X-Men, Kitty came back, and she was kind of living on her own, kind of still trying to fight the good fight. And she wore this cloak, which I wish they would have kept that, because that really helped drive that story. But anyway, this just kind of reminds me of the outfit from that. So yeah, the early Ultimate Comic X-Men are actually worth a read. Check it out. But anyway, I like how the thugs try to shoot at her, phases through, and she's just using these words, the way she's talking to creep these guys out, like those who do violence shall perish by violence. And it kind of reminds me of the way she talks. She reminds me of the Phantom from Mask of the Phantasm, so that's kind of cool. But there's one, where is it here? Where they're all freaking out. Kitty makes them phase, and he's like, my gun, blessed saints, preserve me, I've become a ghost. And so all this is going on, she's thinking, it's working. I guess criminals are a cowardly and superstitious lot. So this made me smile. For those that aren't in the know, that's what Bruce Wayne eventually, kind of his mantra when he originally became Batman, is he said, I have to strike fear into the hearts of criminals, because criminals are a cowardly and superstitious lot. So good on you, Claremont, for throwing a Batman moment in there. And as you're going, you can see that the panels are not boring. They are very dynamic, very classic looking in the way that you used to have to pencil all this. You couldn't use 3D models. You couldn't Photoshop. This was all by hand for the most part. And just look at how Rachel's finally jumps into the fight. And just the way she's terrifyingly looking this way. It's just gorgeous. Now that the fight ends, there's a whole thing about Rachel and how she's not sure what happened to her, and she's still having problems, and Kitty's trying to console her. So you see how these characters care for one another, because Kitty, she has deep, when she cares about someone, she cares for them deep, whether it be Illyana, Rachel, Nightcrawler, all the New Mutants, etc., so forth. And that shows here later on where she's by herself and she's kind of getting inside her head, and it's not breaking her down, but it's really hitting that emotional heartstring, because she goes, they were her best friends, but she never respected them more than on the day they died. Always figured we X-Men led charmed lives, that no matter what we'd pull through. Live forever. Silly girl's hope. Joke sure was on me. And you, Doug Ramsey. Determined to pull your own weight with the New Mutants, even if it killed you. Darn you all. This isn't fair. In our time, we faced the worst villains in the world, in the universe, and we beat them all. How is it the heroes die while they remain? Whew. That hits. Because and we will eventually go over this comic, but kind of let me show you the trade dressing, is the X-Men as well as Doug Ramsey, which is this issue 60 of the New Mutants. This was the death of Doug Ramsey, which we will go over. I don't remember what exact issue it is, but it is part of the Fall of the Mutants where the Uncanny X-Men are pronounced dead. But instead of being dead, they walked through the Siege Perilous, and that's how they ended up in the Australian outback. So Kitty and the whole world thinks the X-Men are dead, and then Doug Ramsey during that time died as well. So she has a hard time processing this, because even though we, the audience, know the X-Men are alive, her and Kurt do not know. So that's why they've kind of thrown in with Excalibur. And this character, Meggan, I don't know if her code name's Magma. I always get really confused on the Magma character because a lot of people have used that name. But anyway, she's bringing the Excalibur team into her lighthouse home, and you kind of start to notice that Kurt and Meggan here start to have feelings for one another. But at this point, Meggan and Captain Britain are an item. And he's like, look, a bed. And she's like, it's not for you. Sigh. So that's kind of interesting. And then again, we get an interlude where Kurt's kind of checking out the house, walks through a door, and we start seeing this madness, like this acid trip fever dream where there's all these demons and aliens and robots from another dimension. But when he tries to tell Meggan about it, it's empty. So again, this was kind of another trope of Claremont, is he would throw all these plot lines out there. And even in that documentary I was talking about at the beginning, he would be talking to Louise Simonson, as he called her, Wheezy, and he'd be like, I don't have any ideas. And she says, well, Chris, what about this plot or this plot or this plot? And he'd go, oh yeah, and start getting back at the typewriter. So again, it's just a really great show to watch, and it really gives you some depth on these books. So again, this story, it was not boring. I was engaged. The panels weren't boring. There's not a whole lot of sitting around and talking. But again, as Claremont always did, when it happens, it means something. Like when Kitty takes the moment to reflect on everything that she's lost and how she's trying to still push on with the X brand. You know what I mean? And so with Rachel, she decides to be Rachel's doppelganger for a reason. Now, I don't want to give that away because it's part of the plot, but a lot of action happens, and the way these werewolves disguise themselves in the wild, that is terrifying. How just they use people as meat puppets, and a lot of, should I say, stakes and drama happen. Now, one thing that I'm a little thrown off at, and remember at the beginning when I said I'm going to pose a question to you guys? So Rachel starts to fight the werewolves to help Kitty. And I think it's here. Wait a minute. Hold on, I will find it, I promise. Here it is. So the werewolves talked to Rachel, and they said, you have a lifetime contract with our boss, Mojo, you naughty girl. Ain't ethical. Ain't right to break it. He made you a star in our dimension. And so she goes full Phoenix mode. And she goes, ethical, right. Bull, I was a slave. And I'll never be one again, no matter what the cost? So my question to you guys is, I know Mojo was introduced way before, oh wow, I did not flip the book around. That is an awesome piece. So let's go ahead and stop here for a moment. What book is it where Rachel became a slave to Mojo? Because this is 1988. This was way before the 1990s X-Men, where the Return of Mojo was at issue 10 or whatever. Because whenever I think of Mojo, when I was younger, I always think of this issue of X-Men, but this is the Return of Longshot, and I think the Return of Mojo as well. So are they talking about the Longshot miniseries? I'm not sure. That's where some of these miniseries that Claremont would do, I get a little confused on where they are in continuity. So let me know. That'd be kind of interesting to read, seeing Rachel as a slave to Mojo, the way that Longshot and Spiral and all those are to Mojo as well. Now again, look at this. We don't really get this quality of artwork in modern comics anymore, or at least should I say the big two, because you'll see a piece from like Todd McFarlane or Jim Lee, and it's gorgeous, but that full back page is just, like I flipped it around, like I took the book out to read it, and I didn't even think to flip it around, because most of the time it's always ads. So when I closed it and I saw this right here in this review, I was just kind of like, took my breath away. That is gorgeous, dynamic page. That's something that I'd love to get blown up and put in a frame on my wall in my study. So, good job, art team. Yummy. So yeah, Excalibur #1. Now, I was on the fence about reading this, because I've said this in the past, where like I'll see a cover, and my expectations kind of go, and I'll buy it anyway, because there's something nagging at me, but then it'll sit on my desk for months on end, and then I'll finally crack it open and read it. And this is another one of those ones where it blew away any type of expectations I had of this being boring. This was engaging and a great read. So if you've enjoyed this book, please first and foremost support your local comic shop and pick it up. If you've enjoyed this review, we really would appreciate it if you take a moment to hit like, share, and subscribe. Helps the club channel more than you can possibly know. And if you wouldn't mind hitting that fancy little X bell next to subscribe, that way as we continue to upload content, you guys will get notified. You can come to the channel, and we love to hear your feedback down in the comments below, or our social media pages, which I'll make sure to leave the links down in the description. So with all that said, thank you so much for stopping by. I hope you all continue to have an absolutely amazing day reading, and happy hunting, true believers.